Welcome back, everybody, to A Plus Parents. And well, I can't even tell you. I'm excited about all our guests, but I'm super excited today to have Colleen Kessler with us. And Colleen and I have had an opportunity to kind of play together really at all kinds of different homeschool conventions over the last several years. So, but I do want to tell you a little bit about Colleen because she is extraordinary. So not only is she the mom of four from ages 18 to 8, she's married and she's worked in the public school system. Now she works in working with homeschool students, but she still works even beyond that as somebody who consults and consults in a special way. So her master's degree work is working with giftedness and gifted students. And where she focused was on the social and emotional needs of gifted students. So if you've got a young person at home, or even maybe yourself, and you've ever thought, well, maybe you've got some giftedness going on, you might notice that what you need is maybe there's some special attention that you need. And Colleen is an expert at that. We're going to talk about all her websites, all the ways to get in touch with her. She's an author. She's a speaker. She's a blogger. She's just awesome. So Colleen, just welcome. I'm so excited that you're here, and how great to see you, because I know we haven't had a chance to connect here in a little while. So it's great to see you again.
Yeah, it's great to see you. I was so excited to get your email inviting me on because I always enjoy our conversations. And it's really, really nice to have that time with you face to face again.
This is so great. Well, and you as well. And I have to tell everybody how, for me, kind of what I remember about how we met, right, is, I saw you, we were at one of the homeschool conventions, and wasn't necessarily you that really drew me to meet you. It was the couch at your booth, right? And it's like, if you've ever been to a convention, man, your feet get tired and all you want to do is take a break and sit down. So there's a couch, it's inviting, there's candy, and then of course there's kids, right? And so I got to meet your oldest boy, Trevor, and we got to start doing math together, and it was just great. So getting to know you and your family over the years has been really, really awesome. And Trevor's graduated now, which is really awesome, and he has quite the entrepreneurial skill set, is the best way to say that, and definitely a gifted young person. So Colleen, tell us a little bit about, because you've had that kind of that transition from working in the public schools to moving into homeschooling. So first, tell us a little bit about your background, and then we want to find out, how did you get into being a homeschool mom? How'd that happen?
Sure. So yeah, it's interesting because a lot of people, when they first, hear that I worked in the public schools and then I homeschooled my kids, mistakenly think that, I left teaching to homeschool. I didn't. I loved teaching. I was good at it. I won awards for creativity in teaching. I wrote books for teachers and kids, and I really, really loved it. I loved the students that I worked with. I loved advocating for their needs as gifted and twice exceptional kids, and for their parents, and helping them advocate as well. But I also loved writing, and I discovered when I had kids that I really loved watching my own kids kind of unfold. And I realized that as a teacher, I'd be spending the vast majority of my time raising other people's children, and I really wanted to be home for mine. Now, at that time, I did not want to be home to homeschool mine. I wanted to be home to get them off the bus, get them on the bus, give them lots of treats, watch them read and learn and enjoy. And then I wanted to keep writing. So at that time, I was already starting to write. I'd had a couple books published while I taught. And I left teaching to freelance full-time and to write full-time. So I wrote books for teachers, books for kids, books for parents. I wrote a few board games, like decks of cards, all sorts of fun things, any kind of assignment that would challenge me and interest me, that came along. And then my oldest started school, and it was pretty obvious early on that he wasn't fitting the traditional kind of public school box. He was very similar to kids I taught, but that like saying, the shoemaker's kid's going shoeless, you don't always recognize really easily what you have in front of you, especially if it's in your area of expertise, because it's just what you do. And so of course I thought, I was projecting a lot of the stuff on my own son, and we were trying to figure out what was wrong with him, how to get him to fit. And through all of that, we discovered that he just wasn't going to fit. He is profoundly gifted, and with a dash of impulsivity and anxiety thrown in there for good measure. We pulled him out of school in the middle of first grade, kind of kicking and screaming. And I had to stop taking a lot of freelance assignments because I had a nursing baby, a toddler, and this first grader who needed me because he was traumatized by some of the things that went on in the school system for him. And so I started writing for fun. I started my blog, documenting what we were doing, and it just started resonating with people and kind of caught on because what we were doing was outside the box with outside the box kids, and not enough people knew about that or could find people who related to them. And so, yeah, that's kind of where I came from. I consult, I coach, I have a membership community, I write books, I write all sorts of different things. And then I have a podcast as well for parents of differently wired kids who are homeschooling them.
Wow. Okay. So, I mean, we're going to come back to how do you manage all that, right? Because I know people listening right now are like, well, okay, aside from having a cape and, superhuman powers, right? How that all that happens. So, you have your oldest coming home as a first grader. Did you notice that, because you had been in the classroom, and I think oftentimes families that decide to homeschool, one of the biggest things that kind of gets for them, a concern is, well, if I don't have any background as a teacher, how am I going to know what to do with my young person? I think it's even the opposite. So I think if you've got a background in public education, you've already got that in your mind about this is what it's supposed to look like. So now you're coming home and thinking, but it doesn't have to look like that. Now what do I do? So how did you see, what were you able to bring home from the classroom, or what did you have to notice that you had to give up so that you could really get to what was important for the kids?
Yeah, such a good question and such a common misconception. And I really think that anybody who has a background in education who is homeschooling that you talk to will have the exact same reaction that you and I both had. It's more of a hindrance than a help. When we go through education, our education to get our education degrees, we're essentially taught to manage a group of kids. We're taught to take a program of any kind that's handed to you, right? And manage it in a way that the vast majority of the kids in your classroom can get the content that's in there, but really it's all about management. And it's totally different when you're home with your own. And then on top of the fact that you don't have to manage a bunch of kids in a room to get the majority of the content, you also have all those emotions, all of that stuff that goes with parenting, right? Because your kids are perfectly designed to push the specific buttons that you have. And they're still doing that. I often say that, parenting is hard, but homeschooling is parenting on steroids, because you're just thrown together all the time and they know those buttons and they're going to push them for everything. And so you need to learn to manage in a different way. And looking back now, so this is our 12th year of homeschooling. Looking back, every single time our homeschooling fell apart, it was because I started retreating to what I knew and what I was comfortable with. And anytime I let go of that public school mindset is when we soared. In the very beginning, it was rocky. I pulled him out in the middle of first grade and set him up on a desk in my office because I was freelancing full time and he did work while I did work. It was a disaster. As soon as we started letting go of like the math workbook and the writing workbook and the spelling workbook and all of that stuff, and started kind of just decompressing and following interests and going down rabbit trails, we started thriving. The kids were enjoying it more. They were picking up things I didn't even know that they knew or that they were being exposed to. And yeah, it was interesting. So we let go a little bit in the beginning because I could see it wasn't working. And I didn't want to take him out of a traumatic situation and put him into another traumatic situation. And then again, I had a baby and a toddler and you're just surviving at that point. But I started pulling in more unit studies, going to the library, going to museums and things like that. And I started watching his mind open back up and his imagination soar. And so I think that, throughout the years, we've gone back to programs and abandoned programs and back to programs, depending on our situation and our comfort level. But every time we thrived as a family, it was when we let go of outside expectations. And yeah, so public school backgrounds, and my husband's still a teacher, this, but maybe listeners don't. My husband still goes in every day and teaches first graders how to read. He's a reading specialist in the elementary school. And so he works with the most struggling of the struggling readers. And we still fight against that idea of pulling out and having, a workbook and having products shown to us at the end of the day. And so it's a constant battle that gets in my way more often than it helps me.
That's amazing. So Brian comes home at the end of the day and you say, hey, honey, how was your day? And he tells you, and you're like, okay, check that off. Don't do that. Check that off. Don't do that. Right.
So much of that. Yes.
Oh, that's awesome. All right. So now you've got, having a background in giftedness, right, kind of gives you the ability to identify when you see gifted young people, or adults, or really anybody. You start to see kind of some of the different signs or signals, right? And I know we all think our kids, I think my kids, oh, they're gifted. I think every parent sees something in their own child that there's something unique and special and wonderful about them, which is absolutely true. Mm-hmm. But sometimes, it's like, well, how do you know? Like, how do you know that this one's like, wow, there's really something gifted, really something exceptional going on here? Is there something that how would you like, so if you met a young person, is there a way is there something you would do, kind of like not like a checklist, but almost like an interview process, that you would start to notice things, maybe something that a mom could notice about her own young person, to say, wow, I think there might be something gifted with my kid?
Yeah, it's so hard because giftedness is neurodiversity, right? It's a brain wiring that's different. And if you look at a bell curve, right? So giftedness at its core, if we were talking about identification, it's an IQ score. It's a cognitive ability. And so if we're looking at the standard distribution, we're talking to a mathematician right now, we're looking at a bell curve of the statistics of IQ scores in the population. Average is what our public schools teach to, right? Because that's the biggest spike in a bell curve. Well, 2 standard deviations below that average are where we have kids who have developmental delays, learning disabilities, struggles in some kind of way. Their brain wiring makes it more difficult for them to get concepts. On the other end of that, on the opposite end of that bell curve, 2 standard deviations above that average score, we have giftedness. We have a gifted IQ kind of cutoff. And those kids, when I can draw this out for parents, I can show them they are just as discrepant as the other end, from average as each other. And so following that logic, they are just as differently wired. They perceive and process the world in just as differently a way. It just looks different. It manifests itself differently. A gifted kid needs fewer repetitions. They pick up things that you didn't even know they had been exposed to, like I said before. Oftentimes they have kind of an insatiable curiosity. They talk incessantly. All of that said, and there are checklists, and I will make sure that you have some links to different things. All of that said, gifted kids, gifted adults, gifted individuals are just as different from one another, if not more so, than they are from the general population, because the brain is wired neurologically to perceive the world in a unique way. And so when those things come into them and into their brains, they're processed in whatever way their giftedness kind of latched onto. So I think the most hallmark characteristic of giftedness, if you're thinking that your kid might have something more there, might be just different or wired differently than those around them, the hallmark characteristic is what we call asynchrony. Most individuals develop in a linear way, right? They go from one milestone to the next, to the next, to the next, which is why parenting books can help most parents. But a gifted or a twice exceptional kid, and just a quick side note, a twice exceptional kid is somebody who is gifted, has a gifted IQ, but then also has a neurological, psychological, academic, or even physical disability along with the giftedness. So sometimes those disabilities mask the giftedness, and the giftedness masks the disabilities. So they're a little harder to tease out. But the hallmark characteristic is that asynchrony. They don't develop linearly. They develop kind of up and down and back and forth, and 2 steps forward, 15 steps back, and then 72 steps forward, or they're like multiple grade levels ahead, say in math, but several grade levels behind in writing, and then just dead on average when it comes to science and history. And so, and then behaviorally, they could be, I mean, I still remember my oldest, bless his heart, throwing mulch with the 8-year-olds on the playground at like 12, almost 13. And it seemed from the outside like this was totally developmentally inappropriate. And when you talk to him, it seems like it's, or talked to him, it seemed like it was developmentally inappropriate because he could talk to you like a young adult. But the truth was, in an asynchronous fashion, it was totally appropriate to him because socially and emotionally, he was many years behind where he was academically, because that part hadn't caught up. The brain had latched on to math and logic and algorithms. I mean, that's when the kid could solve a Rubik's Cube blindfolded, which you have a video of that posted years ago. And so this is what you'll see in your kids if they're gifted. And there's kind of just a knowing. I think we place so much, and it's because it's programmed into us, but we place so much stake, I guess, in the test score or the identification telling you. But the truth of the matter is, when we cut to the chase, parents know like well over 90% of the time that their kid is gifted. So if you think your kid has something different and is wired in a different way, call a spade a spade. They get things quickly, they are asynchronous, they latch onto something, they're multiple grade levels ahead. Like, call them gifted and go find gifted resources to help you, because even if they couldn't pass a test and be identified, there's still something cognitively there that you need to follow, because every kid deserves to learn something new every single day.